Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So today we have Daniel Todd, and after reading his bio and looking to his history of what he's done, he's in a very fascinating space in digital technology and digital marketing, but it's something that kind of goes underrated to a certain extent. So we're definitely going to be able to kind of dive into that and kind of tell you why and what and how you should kind of look at this space moving forward. You guys know I like to, give whoever I'm interviewing a particular nickname. So in this case, the nickname for Daniel is going to be the Reward Boss, and he knows why I'm calling him that, right? So I want you to kind of tell our audience a little bit more about yourself, and what would you like to talk about today?
Well, I like talking about rewards for sure. I've learned a lot of lessons, and I had built a company in the past that didn't have as overt of a value prop to our consumers, and so I figured nothing can be more overt than directly rewarding them, and so that has borne fruit. And I'm happy to talk about why we do that, and really anything that would help your audience grow their own business.
Great. So let's just dive in. I mean, obviously, like rewards, it's a wide definition, right? So I want you to kind of hone in on what aspect of rewards that you guys work on and how does that benefit your current clients?
Sure. So we reward specifically, or primarily, I guess you should say, people that spend money in games. I've shared this a lot, but do you have anybody in your family that plays mobile games on their phone?
That's like asking, does anyone drink water today, right?
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised that people say no to me, but do you have any guesses on how much money is spent in mobile games?
Oh, I'll say billions easily.
Yeah. But so many billions that it's more than in all movies, all concerts, and nearly all live sports combined. It's over $100 billion a year. And what's crazy to think about is that the group that spends the most is females, typically over the age of 35. They typically spend 60% more than any other cohort. And again, this is on mobile devices, right? There's different numbers for consoles. And so with that many billions being spent and concentrated in such a small group, we use rewards, which are basically Amazon, Target, Walmart gift cards, a variety of gift cards, to reward this group of people for finding and continuing to play games within our network. So it's not dissimilar to an airline rewards mile program or credit card reward miles program. We're giving them roughly 10 to 20% cash back in the form of these gift cards. These people are spending typically $5 to $50 a day. So they're getting, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars back. And a few months ago, we gave a person extra bonus points in a given month, and she spent $9,000. And we gave her $2,000 back in rewards. And so you could imagine if we're giving that kind of money back in rewards, these people are already spending money in the games, we're going to disproportionately keep this group, which is what we want. Our clients are the largest game developers in the world. They pay us to find and maintain this audience. And so we're doing everything we can to make that group of high value spenders very, very happy within our network.
So, I mean, obviously you're talking about some pretty decent digits, right? So most people are probably familiar with like American Express or Delta Sky Mile rewards or Hilton rewards. How does your reward system fall into that? Does it swing to one or the other, or is it other rewards that they're getting access to?
The rewards themselves or the actions that they're taking?
The rewards themselves. Like what are you baiting them with for them to actually say, okay, you know what? Like you said, someone is spending up to $50, several $1,000s on a game. What kind of rewards are they getting back that fruitful?
Yeah, so they're getting, well, we have dozens, if not even now hundreds of gift card choices they can choose. So the most popular, because we kind of promote it up front, is Amazon gift cards. So you can basically get anything. If you get an Amazon gift card, buy anything on Amazon. So Amazon, Walmart, and Target probably represent well more than 80% of the total gift cards we give away. We give millions of dollars of rewards away a year. And yeah, 80% of them are those top three, but then there's, dozens, there's movie gift cards and all kinds of other boutique-y gift cards that people can get. We avoid direct cash for now, but lots of gift card options.
So pretty much what you're saying, if a player is playing a game they have more initiative to continue playing their game because they're getting rewards back. So essentially, you can kind of get rewards for Amazon. And so what's the ratio? Like for every dollar spent, like what is the potential reward that's earned back?
It varies, but it's typically 10 to 20% cash back. So if you spend $100, you're routinely going to probably get at least $10. It's possible you can get up to 40. It varies by game, but it averages around 20. So we actually give a little bit of a higher percentage away the more you spend at a single time. So the ratio, like I said, for $100, if you spend it all at once, might be closer to 35%. If you spent it at $1.99 a time, it might be closer to 10%.
Wow. So, I mean, you always hear about parents talking to kids and saying, okay, well, you need to get off the game for a minute, right? You need downtime. But in your space, obviously, I'm just saying the more you play, the more you can earn. So the reality is, it's kind of like, do you ever have any negative feedback because people are continuously playing to kind of get more rewards versus taking a break from these devices?
Not, I mean, we target adults who typically, I think it surprises people, like a lot of the people that earn the most are in their 60s and 70s. So we don't hear a lot of complaints from them. We definitely do not target, we don't even really want people under 18. We don't even really target people in their early 20s. The amount of money that a client might pay us for a 21-year-old is maybe 10% of this, maybe $2 for the install of a game, where they might pay us $20 for the install of a game for that exact same app for an older demographic. So no one's been complaining. We do have, we used to have people who would use our app 10 or 12 hours a day. But as we looked into it, like some people they're in a state in their life where they're either watching TV or they're earning rewards, and they actually preferred this. There was one person who was laid up in bed because of a physical injury, and they felt that our app actually kept them more motivated and interested because they were doing something kind of, semi-positive as opposed to just wasting their time. So I think it's all relative as to what else you would have been able to do. But because so much of 80% of the points we give out are typically tied to purchases. So you can't just grind away forever. You certainly get more points when you play to level 100 than you're playing to level 50. And there's different things, but it's not infinite if you just play forever. So.
Got it. So I want to dive into like your actual apps that you currently have. So you have the reward play, right? And then you have beauty rewards. So I wanted the listener to understand the magnitude of these two programs if they've heard of them before. One of them you've had over 10 million downloads, and the other one at 100,000, right? So you're talking about like a major quantity of individuals that are using these apps. How long did it take to get to that number?
So we launched Rewarded Play in 2018. Beauty Rewards was probably a little bit before that. So that Beauty Rewards was kind of a take. We used to have actually hundreds of apps. We had apps for different sports teams. So if you liked the Patriots, you could play games and earn actual gear from Fanatics. But the seasonality of all those things were kind of painful for us. So we launched, I think it was February 2018. And it took probably a good several years to get to the first million, right? I mean, it takes a while, it starts to disproportionately grow. We add right now somewhere between 14 and 20,000 people a day. So it's typically probably 15,000. So, we're adding 400,000 or 500,000 a month. As you probably aware, in many apps, there's very high churn in that first month. So we don't keep all that many. Like we probably have about 30% of people are probably still active in our app after 30 days after they've installed. So even though you're adding a bunch, what we're really trying to do is find those 5% of people who spend all the money and make sure that they never leave. We have very much, a very different retention pattern on those people than we do, say, a 22-year-old who, could take them a lot longer to earn a substantial amount of rewards than somebody a little older.
So I want you to kind of think about this from a time travel standpoint. I want you to kind of go back and think about you as a kid and adolescent, right? were you that kid that had like that hustle mentality to kind of figure out the loopholes early on in life, or is that something that you kind of grew into and like was part of that gaming? Like I'm trying to kind of depict where you were as a kid and where you are today.
Yeah, I don't know that I was on one extreme or the other, right? So like, I had my occasional lemonade stand, and my parents pimped me out to mow everybody in the neighborhood's, yards. So I would say I kind of got into entrepreneurship because of a close friend. So I started a company. I got into technology in the mid 90s, kind of when everything internet was taking off. And so the one thing that did come from my youth is I was fascinated with video games, and thereby I liked computers because you could play video games on your computer, right? And so when I was in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, I learned just enough about computers that I knew a little bit more than most other people. So then by the time I got into my into my 20s, getting into the workforce, I was actually hired at this insurance company to move them from dummy terminals and put in 1,000 computers. And so it was kind of more my fascination with technology that ended up getting me into entrepreneurship, because then I joined my friend, and then it was the exposure to like the internet and advertising. I mean, I didn't have any of that experience, but I started seeing all those pieces work. And so I'd say there was some very important elements in my youth that led to where I was, but it was probably not until my mid 20s till I really embraced the concept of entrepreneurship.
So when you were being like raised as a kid, were you anybody in your family had the entrepreneurial insight or spirit, something that you can kind of think back to kind of bounce ideas off of today?
My dad was an engineer, but he raised beagles, dogs, right?
Yeah.
And he sold these beagles. He raised about 300 puppies a year, and he sold them throughout to kind of augment his income. I never really considered that entrepreneurship till literally you just said this. And so like in some ways, he modeled that. Like he would take me and we'd drive down to San Francisco. We lived in Southern Oregon, drive down to San Francisco, and he'd sell puppies to people. We'd drive to Vegas and sell puppies to people. And, he augmented his income as an engineer with a second job. So
I mean, it's definitely interesting. I mean, you're saying your dad was like an engineer, he sold puppies, like you were kind of a gamer. So like, how did you end up going to school for like cultural anthropology?
yeah, I actually went, my grandma was big on me wanting to be a doctor.
Mhm.
So I actually started out to be a medical missionary, a guy who, you go out and you help people in need medically. And then, so I started at Oral Roberts University, but I got kneed in the head playing football, got amnesia, and spent like possibly the worst day of my life in the hospital. And I realized that like, I did not want to have to deal with people on their very worst day. Like that's, so even though grandma wanted me to be a doctor, I was like, I can't do it. So I left Oklahoma and went back to Seattle. My parents had moved to Seattle, and I applied at University of Washington, but I didn't have any foreign language credit. So I ended up going to Northwest College, which is a Bible college, because I had a lot of friends there. And the degree itself is called missions, but no one knows what that means. So you take a lot of anthropology classes. So it was sort of like, by that time I was thinking about going into marketing, and I was less on the trail of going into a foreign country. So I graduated and applied to UW again to get my MBA when I was 25. And they said, you scored well enough on your GMAT scores or whatever, but we like people with a little bit more experience. So go work for a few years, come back. The average age of getting your MBA is like 29. And so about that same time, this buddy that was my roommate in college was getting into his first business, which was at the time called Cyber Mortgage, which sold to kind of these big online mortgage companies. And so I got some technology training. He hired me, and in 1997, 1998, kind of when all this stuff was taken off, like I said, I kind of walked backwards in because of my friendship with him into a startup. When he first asked me, I was like, are you crazy? I can't quit my safe job and working at this insurance company. But I did. And then, the experiences that I got, it was a crazy time. Like the internet broke and everybody was failing and all of these different things. And we weren't really smart enough to go home. So we just kept working on things. And it's actually where I laid the foundation for the business today, as we started, if you remember, like Net Zero and Free Eye and all of those internet companies. So in that time period, everybody was freaking out that all their paying customers were going to leave and go to all of, Juno and one of these things. So we built a white label product where we'd go to the ISPs and say, hey, we'll go sell the advertising for you. You take this software, give it away to your customers, and then we'll pay you by the minute. And they're like, sounds great. Problem was, within 12 months, we were, the internet burst. We were, instead of getting paid $15, $20 for every 1,000 ads, we were getting paid like 25 cents for every 1,000 ads. We were paying 50 cents to deliver them. It was, everything went bad. But we noticed this one thing. We noticed that when you were showing ads to people, I mean, this seems very obvious now, but when you're showing ads to people, if you actually knew what they were looking for the minute when you showed them the ad, it would be much more effective. Again, this seems very like not rocket science. So if a person was searching for Bahama Cruise on the internet and you could show them an ad for Bahama Cruise, which is ultimately what Google's moved into, right? Search ads. So we started releasing software that was like a toolbar before Google and Yahoo had toolbars. And we'd give away all this free software and we'd show at the time different kinds of ads, pop-up ads and slider ads and different things. And out of the blue, that started working very, very well. And so we kind of moved from this failed model of free internet to free games and free everything else. And I was telling you, like, we didn't do a very good job with the consumer value proposition. We typically bundle our toolbars with free downloadable software. If you remember, like Kazaa and all of these music sharing apps, when you installed those things, there'd be like 7 pages of other things that you could install. We paid those companies to install our product, got millions of users. It was working, but that, like I said, most people really didn't want an ad toolbar. They just wanted their free music player. And so we never did a good enough job making clear what the value proposition was. But it's really not massively different than what I do today. Today I make it very clear that the users, what the rewards are going to be. But from that early time, from giving effectively free internet to where I am today, there's kind of a straight line of learning and lots of mistakes. And thankfully, the learning fed better decisions over time. And, now we've got a successful company. So
I mean, it sounds like you took from what you did take from your degree was like the ideas, analyzing behaviors, and also analyzing like physical environments, kind of like what you're saying what Google does to a certain extent, right? So I want you to kind of talk about like that's the concept. Where did the technology aspect come from? Is it something that you kind of developed yourself, or did you have to farm it out, or did you just start building a team and started getting people that were highly educated in what you wanted to do and started achieving those goals?
Back in the 90s or now?
Talk about both. Let's just start from the 90s and let's move into today.
So at that time, I've never been a developer, but as I mentioned, I was getting into computers. My business partner at the time, we were both into computers. And so we got enough experience that when we knew developers. Yeah. So we didn't teach ourselves any of those things. We came up with this idea. My buddy's brother was an actual developer. So like when we first started the company and we built that toolbar, there was like 6 of us who all got together and were like, hey, we should all work together. Mm-hmm. I don't actually know I don't think I brought a strong value proposition at that time. Like there was several developers, there was the idea guy, maybe I was the people person. I don't really know, but I did work hard and learned a lot of things. And so in that first iteration, it was, bring in people that had a shared goal, work together, My buddy was funding it out of his own pocket, so he was paying us small amounts of money. And then I was kind of became the product guy. And so I'd go out with salespeople and talk to clients. They'd talk to clients, and the clients would say, no, we don't want to use you because of this, this, and this. And I would take those ideas back to the developers and say, well, what if we did this, this, and this? Then I think they would pay us money. And I got into that, again, kind of haphazardly. And so, but I started to learn that I was pretty good at taking what was a challenge from, like, say, a sales call and converting it into a technical solution, even though I wasn't the one building it.
So definitely interesting. I mean, obviously, like you step into the founder role and the CEO role, and being that your hierarchy is set up that way, there's a president in this equation. So I want you to kind of talk about like what kind of like work do you do versus what Randy does, and how did you guys even meet each other to kind of have such a synergy in the company that you have today?
Sure. So when I started the company, I know I was the CEO and kind of the main business guy, and so I had did those things for a certain number of years and actually got the product to market. And Randy was CEO of a different company called Blind Ferret, and we actually worked with them as kind of like a reseller. And so in my first company, we didn't establish. I never have chosen to like be a sales force first. It was like technology first, get a product that was working, then go find people who could effectively be your outsourced salespeople, and you could get lots of them at one time. And so that is what I did in the first company. So when we launched Influence Mobile and we started building products, I kind of just naturally moved to this same situation and eventually met Randy and his team at Blind Ferret. And so at that time, we had only one direct relationship with a good game developer, and it was really working great. And I would talk to people like Randy, and there was dozens of them. And most of them would tell me like, oh yeah, we understand what you're doing. We're telling everybody exactly what you're doing. But they were basically lying to me, right? No one wanted to actually take the time to explain the rewards model and all these different things. But I believed, and I actually know this is true, that Randy's team did tell their clients, and their clients bought into the concept. And so we started to see some early successes, and he kind of stood out from everybody else. And then kind of right at an inflection point for both of our companies, he came out in the summer of 2018 to Kirkland. And little did either one of us know it was not a good inflection point for either company. Like, we both were kind of in need of something. And so we came together, and he had some things that were strengths. Like, he had this sales firm, of people who had 10 years of client relationships. He had a credit card with a $300,000 account balance. And what we had was this product that was actually working. And so I proposed to him this idea that instead of continuing to take, say, 30% of anything they sold for us, that they start to take less. And I'm like, if you take a lower percentage, so my margin goes up, I'll send you more and more traffic. So you'll get more net dollars, which is all you should really care about. And he's like, that makes sense. And so, and then he said, well, I'll lend you my Amex card so you can buy more Facebook ads to make more money. And so we really started piecing together the strengths of both of our companies in a way that, I'm glad that we did, but it's kind of a little surprising that, two kind of strangers took their companies. But like I said, we both needed it. And when we started in the summer, fall of 2018, we were doing about $30,000 a month together. And as that started to take off, I was telling him, like, eventually this is going to lead to either us needing to merge together, or we're going to get rid of your salespeople and need to hire our own salespeople. And he was open to the idea of this, of us eventually acquiring them. And 2 years later, we did so when we were doing $4 million a month in revenue. So we went from $30,000 a month to $4 million a month, basically leveraging the strength of the technology that we had, strength of the relationships that they had. And then, they were able to help fund it. And then as we came together, there were certain things that he did very well, running the sales team, running the marketing channels, and he continues to run that. He oversees the finance team. And then I kind of continue that role that I developed in my early 20s, where I sit kind of over the product. I work with the developers. I work with customer support. I basically handle the product side. So we don't really do massively different things than we did before we were together as a company. We just, of course, share the resources now in a different way.
I think it's phenomenal, and I kind of set up those dominoes because I kind of, I did my due diligence, knowing some research behind the scenes. I want you to kind of talk about like everything that you just said for a new entrepreneur that's listening and it's like, well, things just kind of fell into play, but obviously there was hurdles you had to overcome. But did you ever think in that journey that your company would be placed as like a top company being rewarded for the best place to work, considering that you guys kind of started it the way you did?
Well, for best places to work, I did, because that's always been pretty important to me. You asked, what did I learn in college as a cultural anthropologist? What I did learn was, people matter, and getting the right team. In the early days of that first company, we hired some people just based on their skills and not really based on their cultural fit. And we learned, and we almost went out of business. And so, yeah, when I would say I'm happily surprised that the product is working so well, right? Like recently there's these companies that track the quality of installs across all of the app developers in the world. And they publish these lists of the top 5 and top 10. And the things that are most important to our clients are what's called ROI, return on investment, and retention, right? 2 very important metrics for our clients. And of all the companies that do this, there were only 4 companies that made the top 5 on ROI and the top 10 on retention. And those companies were Google, Facebook, Snap, and Influence Mobile. That blows my mind, right? That this 70-person company that we're running is able to compete with the big boys who are spending billions and billions of dollars. They're obviously doing a different thing, right? They're trying to anticipate and use data analysis to figure out how to send clients the most qualified players. We're obviously, they can't do anything like we do after the install. And we do this thing where we say, hey, we're going to find people, but then we're going to influence them to stick around. And the fact that we're able to, as such a small company, be recognized globally with those guys does make me proud. And that part's a little surprising for sure.
What I think, like, you're being modest, right? I mean, obviously talking to a brand new entrepreneur or talking to someone that's at maybe $1 million, $5 million range, they're looking at you as a huge company in comparison to the fact that you're making what they make in a year, in a month, right? So I don't want you to kind of shortchange yourself in that aspect. I want you to kind of really think about it from like being an inspiration to entrepreneurs, right? And with that, I want you to kind of talk into, like, I want more of the, like, the personal side to you, right? 'Cause I mean, earlier you was talking about like soccer for a minute, and you talk about you got hit in the head with soccer, but soccer has been like a big part of your life, continuing over and over again. I mean, I think even you coach for a little bit. So I want to kind of talk about, like, how does soccer kind of play into who you are and what you're doing now?
Great question. No, I got kneed in the head playing football in college, but I did play soccer from when I was, in 3rd grade all the way through college. I would say sports in general were very significant from establishing the importance of teamwork, right? Which is, it's my belief that a successful company is fully built on the foundation of the relationships that the coworkers have, right? You can have all kinds of different business models, but they're all helped if you have a great culture, if you have people who like each other, if you have people who want to see each other, right? Like, I've written articles for a number of years, and one of my favorite ones is like how to get rid of the Monday morning blues, right? I'm never unhappy on Sunday. I love the team that I have. I love doing what I'm doing. And so I would have to believe that, like, all those years of team sports contributed to that firm conviction that, because I wasn't very good, right? Of all the players on the soccer team, I was definitely in the bottom half. So seeing how much the top players contributed, I mean, I did my part, right? I was the right defender, but seeing kind of the superstars, it helps you understand the importance of skill sets, who can do what, and being part of the team. And so that's a great question. First time I've ever had that question. Probably teamwork, which is, like I said, pretty important.
Interesting. So diving back into like, the key word of this entire episode is about rewards, right? And I want you to kind of like depict like how that model actually works. Now, obviously people are familiar with like conversions. If they make a purchase, maybe we'll get a percentage of that purchase, more like an affiliate. Or if you're more into like Visa, every single time you do a transaction, there's a fee associated to it. How does your business model actually work, considering that you have the clientele that's reaching out to you to then reach to the actual avatars?
Sure. So the way that it flows is, say there's a single app developer with a bunch of games. They pay us anywhere from $5 to $25 for each unique person that installs their app, right? Now, that price that they pay is kind of like their belief in the future value of that collective audience, right? So if you send people 1,000, if you send a client 1,000 people in one day, they're not making their money back, on day one. So those game developers have a lot of analytics to understand like what's their churn, their retention, return rate. So a lot of these guys, it can take them 6, 7, 8 months to make just 100% of their money back. So they pay us this money. And then what we do that's unique to my knowledge, we're the only company in the world doing this. We take a portion of that money and we turn it into this rewards model that I've explained to you, right? So 80% of the points are going to go to people that make purchases, and another 15% is going to go to people when they hit level 1 and level 10 and level 100, and then some points for just showing up every day. And we then, every time a person installs a game, they see all these options and they say, hey, if I don't spend any money, I'm only going to get this many points. So I have to play a lot of games. But if I do spend money, I get this many points. And it's not infinite. Obviously, we can't just give people points forever. So you might be able to spend, get points on the first several $100s. But if you're spending, $1 million, we're not giving you back $200,000. But one of the things that's most unique is that I have always treated, from a product perspective, I have always treated the product, the player relationship, and our clients as if it was just a revenue share relationship, right? So there are some companies who if you don't do this right, you could lower your value over time because you focus on squeezing too much money out of the equation early. We actually continue to try to invest more and more money into the player journey, extending it many months. So much so that our salespeople have to constantly remind our clients that we typically outperform those yield curves that I was mentioning to you. We substantially outperform those yield curves over time. And this is all stuff I didn't know in 2018. In 2018, I didn't know that this was true. And so it took a lot of time and faith on our side to continue to invest in this, believing that the more we did to make our clients happy, that we'd be rewarded with higher CPIs, which is cost per install. And so that has happened. And so that part has been very rewarding. And maybe I'm giving you a very long answer to a short question, but so that whole ecosystem, which is money comes in after the install, and then we give rewards out over many months, and then they measure it and they know that they get more money back from the clients that we bring to them than any other source. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting model. So I mean, like they're paying, and you're taking portions of that payment to then give the rewards, and then you keep a portion for your company's expenses. So it's a seamless pipeline. As long as you keep delivering, they're going to keep on buying. So it's a win-win scenario.
Yeah. And so our growth model is twofold. Number one is most of our growth is coming from the United States. Launched in Canada last year. We just launched in Australia this month. So we're going to continue to grow just by launching in other countries that our clients want. But a big portion of our growth comes from that product ideation, which is the part I've told you I've kind of been my thing for the last 25 years. So I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to align everybody's interests. How do I make sure that those females that are 65 years old and playing games every day, how do I make sure they love our product? How do I make sure that 2 years from now, they're still wanting to play games, right? And there's a whole bunch of, processes behind that. You want to make sure that they stay engaged with one game, but you can't give them too many games at one time or it dilutes the value. And so there's a lot of patience in the process, because again, we could make more money faster if we just pushed people to install 10 games in the first day, but that would lower the quality. And so, for example, we're launching a new product called Boost, where people who are like the super heavy duty spenders, like that end up being spenders 9 months later, they actually have a pretty clear behavior in the first 24 to 48 hours. And so right now we have no way to like sign them up, because we don't have a mechanism inside of our app to say, hey, welcome to the team of high value spenders. And so we're building a product called Boost, that once we identify these people, we're going to say like, hey, here's your gift card right now. We're just going to like open the VIP line, move them right on up. Don't wait, super fast customer service, all these different things. And again, we're putting faith in this process that by identifying those people in the first 24 to 48 hours, giving them their gift card very quickly, that will end up keeping them around longer, which again feeds this cycle of higher quality, higher pricing. Higher prices means we can spend more on marketing and growth. And so we're constantly trying to analyze the entire ecosystem and figure out what should developers build that will make the whole thing better for everybody.
So it sounds very familiar to like Delta's medallion reward system, right? I mean, obviously you get a lot of more bells and whistles the further up the food chain, and you're looking at the next goal that's in front of you, knowing that you won those rewards, so you're going to play more to get there. Makes perfect sense. So I want to talk about, like, it was a quote on one of your social media pages, and the quote was success is not so much talent, it's about the determination. And I want you to kind of talk about like how has that helped you in believing in that quote to get you to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah, it was kind of the quote came after a lot of suffering, right? And so in my first company, we had a lot of ups and downs, and thankfully some of them were the biggest ones weren't the very first ones, but we kind of just stuck around. And it is weird because people ask me, well, did you ever think about shutting down? And I'm like, no, not really, but that's a good question. We should have maybe thought about that, but we just kind of endured and continued to optimize. There always seemed to be enough hope. I've written a lot of articles on optimism. I'm an optimistic person. I think that goes a long way. And so with optimism comes the ability to tell a story and tell people where you're headed. And if you do that and you care about people, you can get them on board. And so the process of learning that determination works was kind of late in the process, right? So after we had some successes, by enduring, I started to realize that like it wasn't necessarily because I had some magic skill, unless you consider optimism a magic skill, which for some people it is. And that, because it's tricky, because you want to take other people's advice. There's a lot of smart people in the world. There's not too many things new under the sun. But at the same time, you have to figure out, like, how do you take other people's advice, but then follow your gut? And if you are a new entrepreneur, finding the balance between those two things is very tricky, right? Because you generally should be talking to people that are smarter than you for advice. But there were times where I was talking to people smarter than me for advice, and they were like, you should just shut down the company. But they also didn't have the same depth of conviction and experience of what I was seeing. And so I remained optimistic that there was a path forward, and I just stuck with it, even though you could definitely describe the outlook from certain perspectives as bleak. And so once you get through that, though, then all of a sudden the quote makes a lot of sense, because you're like, oh, I stuck with it. It worked out. But I would say I came through it without that being the upfront thought, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And it kind of goes back to whether, and I'm just trying to connect the dots. I mean, obviously your education kind of based upon the cultural aspect of it, right? So, and I think earlier you had said that you guys are kind of dipping into Australia and Canada. So I want you to kind of talk about like the cultural differences between these different regions, and how effective are you guys in diving into that space based because of that education that you've gotten?
You do ask very good questions, sir. I'm not sure that my education has any help, is bearing any fruit on that, other than we were hesitant to jump into a foreign language immediately, right? So I knew that there were challenges to overcome. So we're like, what's the easiest next step that we can do? Well, the easiest next step is our English-speaking neighbors, Canada, right? Australia is not the easiest because it's on the other side of the world, but we did need to figure out what it would take to support people, with US-based server infrastructure. It's all cloud, but so I would say, if anything, we were just a little conscious about not jumping into Germany or France or some of these other very large countries that we could launch prematurely before working out all of the bugs that you could just work out. So but that's a great question. Like I said, I don't think much about my college degree, but it certainly has informed some aspects of what we do.
Well, I want to look at it from the standpoint of, obviously you're talking about our English speaking neighbors, but the cultural aspect of those particular neighbors, especially Australia. And I've had interviews with probably at least a dozen people from Australia at this point, right? And their viewpoints are a little bit different than the American cultural viewpoints. Like, they view things differently, their terminology is a little bit different. So then your marketing strategy, your copy, all these different facets of what goes into what you're doing is going to have to morph and change. And that's why I was kind of saying, well, without you knowing, that degree kind of plays into that play, because now you understand the cultural aspect more deeper than an average person would, considering that it's overseas.
True, but I am not at all like, when you talk about ad copy and marketing, like, and you mentioned Randy's team up in Montreal actually manages all of that. So when we launched in Canada, it's probably actually just like a fish in water for them, because they launched in Canada, right? So, and it's interesting that you're mentioning this with Australia, because we literally just launched in Australia last week. And so I'm going to follow up after this conversation and ask to see if are we seeing comparable conversion rates, because I'm assuming we're kind of doing the same ads, but this team that's managing this, they have for the last 10 plus years managed worldwide advertising campaigns for a lot of different companies. So I actually would give credit to them. They probably know what they're doing, and they're delivering on specific things more so than I'm doing. But
I just think it's definitely fascinating, interesting. And I mean, the fact that you've had so many successes, but again, you're on that growth strategy plan, right? I mean, obviously there's way more other countries and other regions to kind of spread what you do into. So it's a phenomenal concept and idea. So I want you to kind of talk about yourself in like third person, right? I want you to kind of, if you could identify, looking into who you are, if you can kind of select 3 to 5 words to identify who you are today, what would those 3 to 5 words be?
I'd like it to be authentic, right? I don't try to put on airs. I don't, I just want to like people. I'm trustworthy. I want to be trustworthy to people. So when I say I'm going to do something, many people know that. Like, I have an investor who, he doesn't even have me sign. He used to not even have me sign investment docs. He would just trust my word that if I say I was going to do something, I was going to do it. So authentic, trustworthy, I would say maybe loving is too much of a word in the business sense, but caring. I do care about, like, I get a lot of happiness in seeing people come together as a team, and that the working together of the team actually leads to their advancement, right? There's a young woman who was one of our very earliest employees. She's now our VP of operations, and she's worn a bunch of different hats, and she's grown so much in the last 10 years. And you have lots of people who are at various stages of that growth. And so, like, that's actually on some days, the advancement of each person's skill set and their own kind of like future career growth is as satisfying to me as the financial growth of the company. So authentic, trustworthy, caring, I think those would probably be the top 3.
Very interesting. So I want to kind of dive into like your writing. I mean, earlier on we kind of alluded to it a little bit, but you do a lot of article writing. You do it for your website, you do it for Entrepreneur, you do it for Inc. I want you to kind of talk about like, is that
Hmm, cut out there.
that was weird.
You cut out. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. So just talking about that question, I want you to kind of talk to. I kind of have to frame what I was saying because it was like it was weird. It just kind of glitched out and you just kind of
Yeah.
disappeared. But I want to kind of talk about right now with your business, the way it's set up and it's structured. And obviously, you do a lot of writing. You do a lot of writing for your blog. You do a lot of writing for Entrepreneur. You do a lot of writing for Inc. magazine. Do you kind of see this writing as more so a creative outlet, or is it more so a marketing strategy?
Uh, surprising. This might be surprising, but I don't view it as either.
Mm.
I view it as my attempt to communicate things that are important to me to my employees, and I'm choosing to do so in a way that I think they appreciate. Because when I'm writing the article, I'm definitely not writing it for marketing. I don't. Our sales team's amazing. They can go get clients. Like it's not even really. I mean, some of them are business related, but most of them are leadership related. And so you mentioned like best places to work. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to make sure we remain the best place to work in this remote environment. And so a lot of employees see me 2 days a year, 3 days a year, right? And so how are they going to know what's in my head unless I share it with them frequently? So I'm really writing the articles. And then this year I'm starting podcasts like what we're doing today in an effort to communicate to them the things that I consider to be important, how I'm spending my time, what am I spending my time thinking about, which is generally things about how to make their lives better, because I view it as a team. Like they put in their effort to move the company forward, complete their goals and tasks. As the company grows, I have more resources. I can then pay them more fairly. I can give them opportunities to grow. And so really the writing is all focused internally with a nice secondary benefit, which is that I believe it does help other people from time to time, right? There are articles that are applicable to other businesses. The podcasts have been just my way of doing this, where people can see my face and hear my voice instead of, just reading it in the articles. And those have had, those might, you could argue, maybe have more of a positive impact on marketing, because I have a lot of people reaching out to me now when they see these podcasts, just wanting to reconnect. And so it's growing the business connections, I'd say, more so than the articles.
So I want you to kind of play into that from like you have a particular product line called Rewarded Life, right? So I wanted to kind of talk about like how does what you just said kind of play into that? Because I mean, obviously you're really concerned about like your employees. What does Rewarded Life actually mean to you?
So the idea of Rewarded Life is, it kind of comes out of that product stuff I mentioned earlier, where we're constantly trying to figure out how to make this older female audience happy, and that we're somewhat limited in the sense that we don't want them to install 10 games a day. We need them to install at a certain cadence, and not all of them spend money, so they're not earning rewards. So the idea of the Rewarded Life was, there are lots of things that this audience is doing every single day that we can make them money on, right? Like people changing insurance companies, they're going and filling up their gas tank, they're getting groceries. And there are certainly ways to do some of those rewards. Like there's already shopping rewards programs, but our vision for the Rewarded Life is to become the largest unified rewards platform in the world. So these people who are playing games, they don't have to have 10 other programs, right? So when they get their gas, they can get extra points in their Yahtzee game. Or if they go to this pizza place instead of that pizza place, they get more points for whatever game. And so it's kind of our belief that games will be this foundational business model for us, But all these other auxiliary options are things that our audience are already doing, and that they'll just make the small shift to do it within our network if we build them this comprehensive program that gives them more rewards than they're getting today.
So again, you're talking to like above a middle-aged group of individuals, right? So let's say someone is listening to this and they're taking like your leadership style and they're pretty much an owner of a company smaller than yours. What words of wisdom would you like to instill in them as far as the leadership direction to help them to proceed to grow in the right direction?
I would say the word that's been coming to my head a lot recently that I hear from other people is, they say it's unique how intentional I am, right? And so I think through where I want to go. I think through all of the moving pieces. And so, there's a lot of things that you can kind of get stuck on this treadmill when you're small in a company, and there's a book I read in my youth called Tyranny of the Urgent. And there's always these small fires and things, and there's not always good options when you're a small company. You can't just give it to somebody else. But I think if you want to get to the point where you're able to get out of running in the tyranny of the urgent, you have to be intentional with your time. I go to bed very early. I get up pretty early. I schedule out my days. This is not what I did when I was in my youth. And so as I've gotten older, I've been trying to be very intentional about what I want to accomplish and structuring my life in a way that helps me accomplish those things, whether that's from when I go to sleep, what I'm eating. Those things are all foundational to being successful. And then how do I want to relate to my employees? How do I want to, so the articles and those types of things, there's a lot of times where you're taking steps of faith and believing that like that will help. And so, not to belabor it, I would say intentionality is something that can possibly be utilized to improve your life in almost every single way. And there's a book I read called Atomic Habits that really helps break down that concept of like how to start to be intentional in a way that is sustainable. Great book. If anybody wants to read that, that's a good way to start.
Yes, I mean, you brought up Cal Newport as far as that book goes. Are there any other recommendations as far as books that you've read on your journey that you think any entrepreneur that wants to be a really good leader should read?
Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck was really important because it gave words to a concept that I had, which was like, I've always believed that people can go and grow and do anything. But in her book, the simple act of stating 6 different words to 2 different sets of children changed their future, right? She stated to one group, you must have worked really hard. And so like it did 2 things. Number one, it underscores the importance of words and how we communicate to the people around us. But then it also, like I said, I had been talking about for years, company culture. But I couldn't have articulated what I meant what company culture meant to me until I heard and read the book Growth Mindset, because the foundation in my mind for a good company culture is a group of people who are all in the growth mindset. They work together. So Growth Mindset's very good. And there's a whole bunch of books I got on that were talking about, like one was flow and subliminal. There's these ideas about what is happening in our subconscious and how what we put into our heads every day. Like I don't do social media anymore. Like I'm very purposeful or intentional about what gets into my head. And I can see that flowing out into what happens in my future, and understanding like how your subconscious, how much of your day is influenced by your subconscious starts to become pretty scary, actually. Something like 95% of our base decisions are made from our subconscious, which is filled with or is influenced by stuff that we put in. And if we put in a bunch of trash, it's going to have a negative impact over time.
So I mean, being that you saying that you're not on social media that pretty often, right? I mean, if someone is listening to this podcast and they're getting obviously hella value from what you're saying and the insight that you're delivering, how does someone then get in contact with you or get in contact with your company?
Yeah, so the one social media channel I do use is LinkedIn. So people can reach me at Daniel Todd, the under Influence Mobile, or yeah, they can find me on influencemobile.com. My email is just daniel@influencemobile.com. Happy to help people in any way that I can.
Great, great. So that kind of leads me into a couple bonus questions, right? And I think one of them, considering that you've had so many different levels of achievement. I mean, earlier on you was talking about you guys were making 30,000 and that grew to 4 million. And that in itself is a hell of an achievement. But to you, in a personal level, which is your most significant achievement to date?
Uh, I would say the one I shared earlier, the fact that we're making these lists, like we're recognized by these third parties.
Mhm.
And I mean, we have 70 employees, right? The other companies, the other three companies on that list have a combined like 800,000 employees.
Mm.
And so the fact that we can, and we're typically the only private company that makes these top 10 lists, that makes me very proud because it's something that somebody else is recognizing and measuring, right? And so that part combined then with the individual advancements of the employees. So like, as I mentioned, like Megan's growth, I hired her out of college as a copywriter. Now she's a VP of operations. A good friend of mine who's our CTO, he and I have worked together for 30 years. He came in as a developer and moved up as a CTO. So our collective team advancement, right? I mean, we're making more money as a company, but each of the people are making more money in their careers and they're growing and they're enjoying themselves. And like, we really have a fun work environment, and that's very pleasing, right? People don't want to leave, and that makes me very happy as well.
So that leads me to like an interesting question based upon that. I mean, obviously earlier on we were talking about there are some particular entrepreneurs that are at a lower bracket as far as revenue that comes in. You're in the middle, and then obviously you was talking about like Google and the upper echelon per se. But I want you to kind of talk to, if you had an opportunity to sit down with anyone, it could be someone from the past that you've never met, someone that's not even alive today, or someone that's alive today that you want an opportunity to meet, someone that you particularly look up to. Who would that person be and why?
If I could sit down with anybody, that might be,
Uninterrupted for those 24 hours, one on one.
well, I don't want to make it all weird, but if I could talk to anybody in history, I'd probably talk to Jesus for 24 hours. He was a pretty influential dude.
Okay. Well, what's the why behind it, besides the obvious?
Well, it's a pretty important question. So I'd like to get to the bottom of it if I could. And, there's fewer more significant questions in our lives than what's the purpose of life. And I feel like if anybody's going to know it, he would know it. So
that's definitely a solid answer. I mean, it's the answer of all answers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So going into closing, I mean, earlier on you were talking about, starting to build up to becoming into more podcasting and becoming a podcaster. So I like to close out my episodes with whoever I'm interviewing, I'm giving them an opportunity to become the host of my show.
Mhm.
So now the Boston Cage is your show. Now you're the host and I'm your guest. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask me?
Yeah. What got you into podcasting? And are you happy that you are doing it still?
I would say it was a life and death situation to where I kind of had to change what I was doing. I was burning my candlestick a little bit too long for too long. And I had a stroke. And so coming out of the stroke, I had an opportunity to kind of reinvent myself. And my wife today was like, I want you to kind of think about this as a rebranding exercise. Like, you've been rebranding everyone for the past 20 years. Why don't you rebrand yourself and step out from the shadows and step into the light? So I took that to hold, and I was all right. Well, I'll become a podcaster, and that was 3 years ago. And now looking back, I wish I would have did it earlier on. Like even before podcasting was really a thing, I should have kind of dove into this space because I feel like I was designed and developed to be where I am today because I'm giving opportunities to tell people stories, connecting, and then also leaving behind a legacy. When we're all dead and gone, our great grandkids and grandkids after that will have opportunity to hear these conversations and hear the way we think and actually see what our processes are now versus our grandparents before us never had the opportunity to leave that behind.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And I can 100% honestly say you've asked the most thought-provoking questions of any podcast that I've ever participated in. So thank you.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. I mean, I would say it's almost an obsession at this point for me to kind of really dive in to like, I want to really tell that story for the listener to really comprehend and to take action on what you're saying. And again, they could always go to any other podcast and get like the typical stuff, like, what's your revenue, what's your business, and all the other stuff. I want that to be there, but I also want some of you and some of that personal stuff to be there as well to make it have more longevity.
Love it. Well,
Great.
thank you very much. I've appreciated it, and I look forward to sharing this with everybody in the company.
Great. Well, I definitely appreciate you, and I think our listeners definitely got some serious insight from an individual that not only is taught, like the way you think and the process is unique in the fact that you want to see other people around you succeed as much as you're succeeding, and you're giving so much back as well. So I definitely appreciate that from you coming as a leader.
Thank you.
S.A. Grant.